Noise doesn't mean anything if it's not causing conversion. The truth why most UGC flops is not actually because they create it, but I think it's because of the brand's like internal disconnection from real people. Nobody actually cares how good your product looks if they don't feel something. And if we don't feel some type of connection, the brand is, obviously missing the point. It's not even about the hook now, it's actually about the first frame. Video game with 10 million views might look cool, but it could drive $0 in sales. Trust me, and I've been there.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Ecommerce Coffee Break podcast. In today's episode, we discuss why user-generated content isn't converting. Let's face it, most user-generated content might look good on a feed, but it doesn't drive sales. Brands spend big on polished, trendy creator content and still wonder why it's nothing converting. So what's going wrong? And more importantly, how can you fix this? That's exactly what we're going to dive into today. And joining me for this today is Elijah Khasabo. He's the founder of Vidovo, a UGC platform he bootstrapped from his college dorm with no outside funding. He worked with over 100 brands and over 7,000 creators, helping teams create content that actually performs. So let's welcome him to the show. Hey, Elijah, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm very well. Let's dive right into it. What's the biggest reason most user-generated content doesn't work for brands today?
So I think it's a great question. And obviously, everyone has their own opinion to this, but based off what we're seeing, I truly believe the truth why most UGC flops is not actually because they create it, but I think it's because of the brand's like internal disconnection from real people. I think brands don't really understand their customer well enough. Too many teams are sitting in meetings just trying to, reverse engineer virality instead of starting with the basic human psychology. Like you need to understand attention, you need to understand reliability, you need to understand emotion, you need to understand trust, right? And I believe when it comes to briefing, the brands are either like, okay, here, do whatever creator, or here's a 3-page, script that we want you to follow word for word, which I think is just incorrect, right? Because nobody, I believe nobody actually cares how good your product looks if they don't feel something. In today's age, you want to, especially as a consumer, when you're reviewing these TikToks, reviewing these reels, or viewing YouTube videos, we're obviously watching these people because we feel some type of connection, right? And if we don't feel some type of connection, then the brand is, obviously missing the point of what they're supposed to market to that individual. So I think what we've seen across, thousands of videos now, I'd say, is that what moves the needle isn't polished, but it's, patterns that interrupt, right? So tension in the first 2 seconds. It's not even about the hook now. It's actually about the first frame, because people's attention spans are so quick nowadays. They will swipe just like that, right? And then, I would truly believe that proof is solved. Proof solves a real pain point. But even when brands get that part right, they blow it by throwing every asset into meta without testing, right? There's no iteration. There's no learning loop. It should be a system, not a gamble, right? So what we're trying to tell our brands is like, build a system out of this, have a playbook, do things ethical, be right, but also be creative, right? You have to understand you are working with the creator at the end of the day, and you want them to show their creativity. And obviously earlier I said, like, it's either do whatever, here's a 3-page script. I honestly think, like, give them a lighter brief, like give them something so light, like, hey, here are the don'ts. Here's what people love about our brand. Here's what performed in the past. Just give them enough information that they can go and use their creativity and build off of that, right? That's the system. That's not a gamble right there. I truly believe if your content isn't producing insights or any positive metrics, then it's just noise. And, noise doesn't mean anything if it's not causing conversion, right? And, the fix at the end of the day, it isn't more videos. I would honestly argue it can be less content as long as there's more clarity, direction, and feedback that's actually being built in, right? And I think most brands are just so caught up in what actually looks good and, without knowing why it works. Everyone wants this TikTok style UGC, but it doesn't stop to ask, like, what's the goal of the content, right? Are you trying to get clicked? Are you trying to educate? Are you trying to convert? Are you trying to build trust? Because a video game with 10 million views might look cool, but it could drive $0 in sales. Trust me, and I've been there. So I think I have a good history with that. But that would be my overall answer. I mean, you just need to know that if you don't know the role of each asset in your funnel, you're pretty much just burning money. So know the role of, like, what each asset is actually doing. And I think that'll, set you up in a good direction, right?
No, absolutely. And I would agree. So this was very packed with a lot of golden nuggets in there. And I want to unpack this a little bit more. So obviously working from a script doesn't work. I think most of our listeners can follow this kind of concept. Now, you mentioned having the right hook. I want to dive a little bit deeper into this. People might have difficulties finding the idea of what a hook is. And on that, I want to know, how does a hook work differently on different platforms?
That's a great question. Um, Obviously, when brands are either targeting a meta audience via Meta, audience via TikTok, or audience via YouTube, you're targeting typically different consumers, right? TikTok, you're seeing more of the Gen Z, millennial. Meta, you're seeing obviously a huge mix, but mostly millennial, middle age, or older than Gen X. And YouTube is it's pretty much all over, right? Um, Brands have to understand like you have to have different iterations before different platforms, and which is why we're actually telling your brands like, hey, make sure you're making multiple variations, different hooks, different CTAs for different platforms, right? Because what might work on TikTok obviously might not work on Meta, right? Is what we're seeing. So TikTok style content is pretty fast, pretty straight to the point. People just want to be informed quickly. They want to be entertained quickly. So one thing I'm noticing on TikTok, what actually performs really well is when a creator's talking from a car or talking on a walk. And the reason why I say it is because it feels like they're on FaceTime with the other individual. If you're listening to this, I seriously go on TikTok and just scroll. And most of the videos you'll actually watch are like the ones that feel so real that it feels like FaceTime. So I think those are the type of hooks that are working on TikTok. On Meta, we're obviously seeing more, I hate using this word, but more polished hooks. Something that just hooks you in right away, something that moms can just, be attended to right away and just be informed right away, right? Whether it feels like that FaceTime vibe or not. So it really comes down to obviously the product, right? But platform plays a big factor. And I think understand the style of what your consumers are typically viewing on those platforms is the best way to understand how to get the best hook for your product.
Totally. And I had the same experience. I had content out there which was performing very well on one platform and completely, absolutely nothing happened on another platform. And then you're standing there and say, okay, what's happening here? So
Exactly.
I want to dive a little bit into the production of UGC videos. You mentioned it should feel natural. It should feel like it's coming from a FaceTime or whatever. Now, obviously, as a creator in the background and you helping them with that, there needs to be a sort of a workflow to it to make it work. What's your solution to that? What's your approach?
It's a great question. So I follow this model and I actually share in a bunch of Slack channels I'm in. Share with as many brands, even if they work with us or don't. Like the light brief to like a solidified playbook model. And what that essentially is kind of what I mentioned earlier. You're going in, you're creating a light brief. So you're putting the do's and don'ts. Honestly, you don't have to put the do's, put the don'ts. Put a brief description of what the brand is, what you guys are looking for, what's performed in the past. Here are some reference videos. We actually built this all into our platform. At first, we actually didn't have it, but our goal was to build a campaign brief to actually work in favor of both sides. And then just allow the creator, like as I mentioned earlier, to just use their creativity, right? I think brands get too caught up in, the scripting and, everything having to be polished right away when I think it should be opposite. I think in the beginning, you need to test different versions. You need to let creators just come up with their own ideas. Creator is literally in their name. Create is literally in their name. So it's like, let them just use their creativity. And then what model I recommend the best is make sure the brand is actually communicating with the creator throughout the whole process. I think what gets lost in our industry a lot is things become too transactional. And what we build on our platform is like, hey, let's make sure like brands can actually communicate with the creator before any transaction is done. So if you want to confirm details before and not waste time, you can do so, because most of the time you have to pay first and you get straight into it. I like brands to be able to confirm details if they would like so, right? Some people just pay right away, some people don't, right? If they'd like to, right? So confirm details, confirm the concept that the creator wants to go with, run it back with your team. And that allows you to have like say you work 10 creators, you have 10 different concepts, 10 different briefs for every single creator. And now you get to let them go about it, produce in their own way. Obviously, you're able to see their previous work examples, so you can kind of relate to what you're expecting or what you'd like the creator to create. And obviously, once that content gets back to you, you're testing, right? If you need extra variations, you can. If you want to meta whitelist it, which is a big thing we're seeing nowadays, you can. But once you start testing, you need to see what is performing. So let's say 4 videos out of those 10 perform. Now, this one I recommend a brand double down on those concepts. So now you can actually get more into a heavier briefing, not too much scripting, but a heavier brief. Like, hey, this concept has worked. Let's build it on this concept, right? So I always recommend a light brief to a playbook, light brief to heavy brief play, because you get to get a variation of so many different content types. And if there's content types that didn't perform in brief batch 1, maybe you want to revisit a different style with it, depending on the concept that did perform, right? So it's all about testing. I think at the end of the day, it all comes with the testing, but yeah, that's what I'd say for that.
Okay. I want to get a little bit in your own history. So you bootstrapped your business from the ground up. I'm a big fan of bootstrapping, but it's a very tough way sometimes. What taught you your own way of becoming an entrepreneur and obviously getting your own content out there that helped you in your business that you have right now?
Yeah. So, being able to bootstrap puts you in a position to obviously learn a lot, right? So we were able to test a lot of things. Obviously, every dollar matters when you're bootstrapping, so it allows you to test different concepts. But when it comes to content for myself, I was actually a LinkedIn guy, right? So I started on Twitter and I went to LinkedIn. And the worst thing about it, I was actually very embarrassed to create content in the beginning, just because we weren't making any money. We didn't have enough creators. We didn't have enough brands. I felt like I was just kind of blabbing out there, into the dark abyss. Like no one was actually listening to what I was creating, right? But at the end of the day, I do believe in all retrospect, content is king. Whether it's video, whether it's written, content is king at the end of the day, right? So being able to just write out there and say like, hey, here's my story. Here's how I'm bootstrapping. Here's how we're building for brands. Here's how we're building for creators, and letting people know, even if I had no followers at the time, it would start to pick up because people do find you. You start with one viewer, obviously, then two, then 10, then 100, and it just keeps going, right? And obviously, I was just blabbing out there. It's funny because I used to actually have a ghostwriter. And he kind of just helped me build up my status. And it got to a point where I would say 6-7 months in, I actually got sick of like the content that was being put out because it just didn't sound like me. And I was starting to meet more people in person. I was starting to have a lot more demos, a lot more calls. And like I would look back at the content like, that doesn't even sound like me. So I actually let go of him. He's a great guy. I did let go of him though. And I just started writing my own content, right? And I truly believe people want to know more about you. They want to know your personal story. They don't want to see the the ghostwriting crap, right? So as soon as I started putting my own content out there, it if we started performing really well, people were actually able to see like who I was and what I was building, right? And it was very exciting. So you learn a lot through bootstrapping. You get to test a lot of things. Obviously, you don't have a lot of cash, but I would say content has been king for us over here.
I like this background that you have there. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. It's very difficult. And specifically, if you're new in a business, you don't have a huge marketing budget, user-generated content, and what you did, starting and building a community, is probably the right way, because everything right now in the internet goes in the direction of paid content and becomes very difficult as a startup. Now, I want to go back into the user-generated content side of it. How do you help creators and brands coming together, and what does your solution offer?
Yeah. So the way we built Vidovo was very interesting. Just because we were bootstrapping, I felt like we had to follow a different playbook than most of our competitors, because a majority of our competitors, I would say most, if not all, have raised money, right? So obviously they were so focused on investor KPIs, which ultimately mean they had to be focused on brand acquisition, right? We actually took the opposite approach. I was like, okay, I'm willing to take the risk, because if we follow that playbook, we'll probably get burned, right? Because every other platform has more credibility than we do. But if we actually focus on the opposite of brand acquisition, focus on creator acquisition, how can we get the best creators on our platform? I felt like indirectly in the long run, it would actually build brand experience. Like it would increase brand experience on our platform, because at the end of the day, brands want to be where the best creators are. So I started hunting out. I just started talking to creators and creators only. Popular creators on Twitter, on Facebook, some on TikTok and Instagram. And my goal is just to build and develop relationships. Because the more I could do that, the more they could naturally just talk about Vidovo and actually use our platform and see the belief and vision that we are building. I don't think most platforms took that perspective. Obviously, this was a long-term play, because you don't make a lot of money just getting creators on your platform, right? But once you do get a brand on, they stick and they say really good things about you because they love the creators that are on your platform. So taking that high quality approach is something I would recommend to any agency, to any platform that is building. Like be creator first, right? Because the brands will come and they will stay. Brands are not going to stay on your platform long if there's not good creators. Most of the brands that come to our platform come from others because there's such good creators on our platform. So our goal is like, how can we build a fair and flexible system that gives leverage to the creator and not all the focus and leverage to the brand, right? So when we obviously building this, it made a sticky solution for both sides. We get high quality creators and we get high quality brands, right? So both sides are very happy. And there's a two-way collaboration process on our platform. You have our marketplace and you also have our campaign feature. And the marketplace is where we list all of our vetted creators. So you have to be approved by myself. I go through about 500 per month, but TikTok recently blew up about it. So I have about 3,000 to go through this month, but that's okay. What I do, the way I vet is either you have to be good at creating content, have potential in creating content, or be an influencer, right? If you meet one of those three criteria, you'll be approved into the marketplace because the marketplace allows you to list yourself for brands to actually find you, right? We're not, because most gigs, most platforms, you always have to keep applying as a creator, whereas ours, like, we want to have both sides have leverage, so the creators can list their own rates, right? So you're going out as a brand and you're working with a creator one-on-one with vetted creators. Our campaign features are bread and butter. This is essentially where a brand is creating a brief for creators to apply to. And once you can put your creator preferences, you can put your asset information in there, you can put, product details, you can put all your campaign brief info. But what you're doing is basically, in the simplest term, you're creating an application for these creators. They'll apply, you'll see their name, you'll see their proposal message, you'll see some video examples, and you'll see their pricing range. Because on the campaigns, we actually let the brand list their own budget range, whereas marketplace, it's up to the creator. So both sides have leverage in both ways. And I think that's the best way to connect brands with creators in the most ethical and fair way.
No, totally. And I think this transparency that you have there makes everyone's life much, much easier. Now, talk me through a timeline for a brand. What's the usual time before they find creators, before they can really start a campaign?
Great question. So timeline it's honestly, it's like a subjective term on our platform. So obviously, once the creator is approved into a campaign, they have about 10 calendar days to deliver the content, right? But realistically, I don't know if you know, but early in this podcast, what I mentioned was we actually allow the brand and the creator to communicate before any transaction is done, right? So as a brand, you could message 10 creators and you could let them know, like, hey, we need our content by next Wednesday, and it's Tuesday. So you need our content by next Wednesday. So not the 10 calendar days, but like, hey, let's say 6-7 calendar days. You can do that because most creators are obviously going to agree if it's going to improve their chances of being approved, right? So we're very flexible on how deadlines are, but timeline to launching a brief takes about 5 minutes. Once you launch the brief, I usually recommend brands give it at least 48 to 72 hours to just let the applicants roll in. I think 3 days is typically enough to let like all the active applicants roll in. Once you're over that number of like 100, 200 applicants, and I would recommend start sourcing. Some start as early as 20 applicants. Like, you can do whatever you want, but I usually recommend 72 hours, right? And after that, obviously go in, vet, approve the creators you want to work with. And then obviously once you approve the creators, the deadline then starts, right? So it's like I said, it's a very flexible deadline because you can pretty much dictate how you want it to go. But on platform and rule, it is 10 calendar days.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. Now, a lot of our listeners running DTC brands, having e-commerce businesses out there, for them, obviously, giving samples of their product to a creator is crucial. How do you deal with this? How does that work?
That's a great question. So it's funny because obviously as a brand, you have to factor in the cost of the product plus the cost of the creator, unless you go the gifted route, because we do allow for gifted campaigns.
Mm-hmm.
I have noticed though, majority of our campaigns, I would say about 90% have been paid this year. Last year, which is basically our first fiscal year, I would say about 60 to 7% were paid. I don't know if it's because our ICP has changed, like we're working with bigger brands. I don't know if it's just because brands are just understanding the creator economy is just growing, and most quality creators aren't doing gifted campaigns. We're seeing kind of answers to both right now. So what I tell most brands is, you obviously have to have a set amount of budget for this platform to work for you, right? Because if you're very worried about the product or the sample of the product being that cost affecting you, we're probably not the best solution for you, right? And I don't mean that with any disrespect. It's just the truth. Like we don't want brands to worry about that. But then you also worry about the other retrospective is like, hey, we do have enough money. We do understand the cost and all that stuff, but we just don't want the creator ghosting or not doing the content or doing anything like that, right? The best thing about our platform is like we actually allow an escrow system within the payment, right? Which protects both the brand and the creator, obviously mostly favoring the brand. So if anything does go wrong, obviously we can just reimburse you, right? So we're very protective of both sides, and we haven't really ran into any issues like our cases are, I would say, pretty low on ghosting issues, just because we're so selective on how we go about creators. I do notice when you just like approve any creator, obviously ghosting can be a very big thing. But the more you focus on quality, the less you have to deal with samples being destroyed or samples not even being used or the creator going ghost, right? So I just let the brands like, hey, we are protecting you regardless of what happens. I wouldn't worry too much because we do have a good selective batch of creators, but definitely protecting on both ends.
I never thought about the concept of ghosting on creators, but it makes perfectly sense. So,
Yeah.
and as a brand, sort of, that can be a real problem if they're ghosting you. Now, talk me through, or can you share an example or case study of brands you have worked with and what kind of results they saw?
Yeah, for sure. So I'll give this first case study because this was our first ever case study. It was also our first customer, so it was really good to get like a success story from her. Well, when I was actually first pitching Vidovo, I couldn't close a deal to save my life. Like it was probably the toughest thing ever. And this is when we kind of operated like a SaaS agency. Like it was a little different back then, and I knew we had to switch it up. I'll never forget. I was demoing this brand called Newfix, um, and I was pitching a product that actually wasn't even finished. I was like, oh, let me just go pitch this product. Like I'm not closing business anyways. Like I'll just try something new. And it was our campaign feature, which is what our bread and butter is today. And I'll never forget, when 10 minutes into the call, she was like, I want to sign on right now. And I told her, like, well, it's not ready yet. So I was honest with her. Like, I was just pitching a product that wasn't done because I didn't really expect, a brand to bite because no one was biting. I was at about 30 demos at that time. We only closed like 2 deals, which were both warm referrals. I had to close those. But she got, once we finished over the weekend, she got on Monday, got her content by Thursday, and started running ads. It performed really well. So she saw, I think it was our first success story. She saw about 4x ROAS. Our cost per click reduced by I think 40%. This is on our website, and our click through rate was about 2 to 3%. I could be wrong on that, right? But that was our first success story to show like, okay, cool, UGC is really working for these brands, and that was our first health and wellness brand. Now we have a bunch of success stories. Brands are constantly using our content for performance, right? Like they're just like, hey, we're using Vidovo, getting the content, just putting it towards Meta or TikTok. One of our most recent case studies that was, I still don't actually believe, but I guess it's true. And one of our agencies, because we do support agencies now, approached us with 3 brands that they wanted to work with. One of the brands was actually a chocolate brand. They bought about like 10 to 15 assets. Um, I think about 6 of the assets performed, right? Out of the 10, I think it was actually 10, not 15. And one of the videos got 106 ROAS. The brand spent $100 and generated, I think, 11.4, 11.6, if my math is right, but just south of $12,000. And I'm still in shock, right? But the best thing about stuff like that, especially for agencies, when they show their clients that, their clients are more inclined to want to use UGC with them, right? So we allow agencies to work with us. We're very agency friendly. But the biggest metric that most of our brands are tracking is usually ROAS, reducing cost per click, reducing CPA, especially. Um, and the organic end is mostly just views and engagement. Most of our brands just use this for paid, not a lot of organic stuff. But yeah, I have a bunch of case studies. Actually, I have to upload 6 more case studies into our website that are kind of just sitting there. But yeah, I would say that's probably the most recent one that was very exciting.
Okay. Now, obviously, if you have content that goes viral, then the numbers go through the roof, and that's the whole goal at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Now, you just said that you're working also with agency. Who overall is your perfect customer?
Yeah, it's a great question because I'm still figuring that out. Obviously, ideally, we want to work with more brands. What I have noticed though, it's been very easy to work with agents. It's very easy to work with brands, but agencies use this legit as like a tool into their systems already. So they'll go to their brands, they'll pitch their brands like, hey, we now offer UGC, or hey, we are using Vidovo for UGC. Whether they white label us or they don't white label us, right? I launched the agency plan late 24. And since then we've onboarded over, I believe over 12, 13, 14, I think 14, 15 agencies. I've only churned 1, which is pretty good, right? But they've all seen success with their clients. And I think it's awesome because agencies bring multiple brands, obviously, and when it's good for the creators because creators are fed more brands to work with, right? And it's also good for the actual brands, like not coming through agencies because they're like, oh, what cool! All these creators are working with these type of brands. This is all the content you guys have created. So it's agencies really have been building our cycle in a way. But funny enough, we're onboarding more agencies and brands right now. But some months it's different. Some months it's more brands than agencies. But I don't have a perfect customer because I love both, but I would say we can definitely support both though.
Okay, oh, that sounds good. Tell me about your pricing structure. How do you charge for your service?
Yeah, of course. So we are subscription based. So as to date, which is funny because we're actually raising our prices this week, but as to date, we charge $249, $399, $699. So $249, $399 a month is for the brands. One's like a limited version. The $249, one seat, one brand. You can only do one campaign. The $399 is our more unlimited version. It's 2 seats, 2 brands, and it's $20 per additional seat. So there's no limit to the amount of seats and brands you can have. And then you get up to 10 campaigns. You do paid and gifted. So both are month to month, and we have a 2-week trial. Mm-hmm. Adding the 2-week trial has probably been the biggest thing about us because, again, as I mentioned earlier, we allow you to communicate with the creators beforehand. So essentially, the brand's risk is very low because they could basically go on our platform, launch a brief, talk to 100 creators, not spend a single dime. And if they're like, hey, this platform isn't a fit, they could just cancel, right? And I say that on every single demo. And typically when the brand hears like, whoa, there is no risk here, like, why not just test it? Right. So our conversion rate is so high. And because we built such a good platform, a good product, and have such good creators, the churn is so low. So the adding a 2-week trial has been probably the biggest plus for us because we built the product in the right way. Right. Whereas if we did build the product in the right way, let's say we just focused on only brands, and the creators weren't that good, the 2-week trial wouldn't really work. Right. So it's been the biggest conversion thing for us. And we also have a managed service, which starts at $5,000 a month, which if brands don't want to use a self-service platform, they can obviously work with us through that.
Okay. I like the idea with the 2 weeks of free trial. And as you said, you really get a feeling of who the creators are. You can reach out. So I think that's very transparent, makes it very easy to make a informed decision if you want to go with your platform.
Yep.
Elijah, before our coffee break comes to an end today, is there anything you want to share with our listeners that we haven't covered yet?
That's a great question. I would just say, be creative, be open. To the founders that are, bootstrapping their own brands, keep going. I believe in you. A lot of people do. There's light definitely at the end of the tunnel. The first 6 to 8 months were probably the darkest times for me, but we got through it, right? You don't get through it by quitting. To the creators, if there are any creators listening, keep creating great content, keep being true to yourself, keep creating content that aligns with your values. And just be curious. I think that's the best thing, the best advice I gave is just being curious. And this goes for everybody. I think curiosity is probably the biggest driver for me because it allowed me to kind of just drop any ego I had in the beginning of Vidovo and just learn from anybody. I don't care what type of experience you have. I don't care what type of money you're making. If you did something that is, that I wanted to learn about, I will sit there and I will, pick your brain apart and learn everything I can. Right. I'm a big person on learning. Even I was down in Bentonville last month because we're working with a lot of retail brands now. And I walked through a Walmart for 2 hours, every single aisle, just learning the science behind retail, right? Sometimes you just have to be curious and be able to learn because the more information you have, there's obviously more you can do. So,
yeah, I think that's very good advice you have there, and I couldn't agree more. Be curious as a founder, as an entrepreneur. You might have your tough times, but just push through, be curious, and you eventually will make it. Where can people go and find out more about you?
Yeah, you guys could. I'm a LinkedIn guy, so not as much as I used to be, but you could find me on LinkedIn. I'm Elijah Khasabo. Vidovo is also on LinkedIn. I'm also frequently I'm more of a lurker on Twitter. I don't really post. So those are the 2 platforms I'm mainly on. And I also do have a personal website, but I don't really touch it. So it's just ElijahKhasabo.com. But LinkedIn is probably the best place you can find me, and Vidovo.com to find Vidovo, obviously.
Perfect. I will put all the links in the show notes, then you're just one click away. Elijah, thanks so much for giving us an overview of what really works in UGC. I hope a lot of our listeners will reach out to you and do the 2-week trial. And I'm sure a lot of people will love it and become new customers of yours. Thanks so much for your time today.
Yeah, appreciate it.